What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and I hope you're all doing well today. This video is one I meant to get out a little sooner, and I apologize for the delay. Basically, for those who hadn't seen it, there are a lot of legendary tuning changes going on the patch 905 PTR for a lot of classes, and rogues across all three specs have received their own changes. So I wanted to get on the PTR and try them out for myself and see what they could possibly mean for us. Would it actually be enough to change our best-in-slot options to the point where we'd have to farm more Soul Ash and spend thousands of Soul Ash to upgrade legendaries, and then have to spend money on WoW tokens to buy gold so that way we could get the upgraded legendary armor pieces that we need? While that sounds like a pretty Blizzard thing of them to do, the answer might surprise you. So these first couple patch 905 PTR builds have been focused on tuning of Covenant abilities and legendaries, which us sneaky boys have received quite a number of changes from. The real question is, will these changes have any impact on what legendaries we use in what situations for each spec? Well, first and foremost, as part of my usual disclaimers on tuning and PTR stuff, is I do look at this from a purely PvE perspective, so raiding and Mythic Plus and cleave or single target situations and things like that. And there is still a lot of opportunity for changes to be reverted or altered further, so don't take this information as the end-all, be-all decision on your legendary crafting process for patch 905, at least not yet. Secondly, I'd like to thank the awesome theory crafters over on the Ravenholt Discord, as well as the folks who work on the Simulation Craft program that I imagine a large amount of the WoW community uses. While I do my best to test things and give feedback or report issues and just see how things feel and perform, these are the folks who know exactly how to decipher all these changes, buffs, and nerfs that we see all the time over every expansion. So if you get the chance, I recommend swinging by the Ravenholt Discord and just letting them know that you appreciate the work they put into all this for the rest of us. You'd be surprised how much a little thank you can brighten someone's day. Sentimentality aside, there are a lot of tuning changes coming out for rogues in the coming weeks. To show no bias in the order I'll be covering these, we'll start with the generic rogue legendary powers first, and then go in alphabetical order for the three specs of Sneaky Boy. I'll also give a personal verdict on whether or not the changes seem like they might have an effect on choices in the future, but again, please remember to take this information with a grain of salt, as it could change literally tomorrow for all I know. We'll start with Essence of Bloodfang. This legendary causes your combo point generators to have a chance to apply the Bloodfang debuff, which deals damage over 6 seconds, and half that damage dealt from the bleed heals you. The bleed portion of this legendary has received a 30% damage increase. However, this legendary is an average to below average choice in most situations for all three specs. As for Outlaw, you don't have any spammable AoE combo point generator because Blade Flurry does not trigger the chance for Bloodfang on cleaved targets. And in single target, we have far stronger choices. For Assassination, it does become better when you start using Fan of Knives in high target situations, but that also requires your Fan of Knives critically hitting for those Seal Fate combo points, and then relying on the proc chance for the legendary to occur, which is 30% chance for every enemy hit with a combo point generator. Subtlety has by far the easiest time with this legendary, as Shuriken Storm is guaranteed combo points every time you cast it on every target it hits, so this becomes pretty decent in large trash pulls. But due to this overly niche usage, Finality is a much more reliable and consistent choice overall. I personally don't see this buff being enough to make Bloodfang a relevant choice, to be honest, except in really edge case situations where as Subtlety you're hitting 8 targets for really long extended periods of time, which is possible, I guess. Next we have Mark of the Master Assassin. This is the only nerfed legendary of all the changes coming up, and at first you might not see what has happened to it. It still gives 100% crit chance for 4 seconds after breaking stealth, just like it does on live. However, it now only affects our auto attack damage and damaging abilities, meaning it will not work with trinkets like the Skulker's Wing or your Dreadfire Vessel or literally any trinket at all. This change will hurt us most in the Necrotic Wake dungeon though, as it will no longer let us do those huge pulls with the spears and the anima orbs to explode entire trash packs. A very unfortunate change, and was most likely brought on by the heavily spammed usage in the MDI, which at this point I honestly think Blizzard just keeps around exclusively to see how cheesy players will be with the usage of game mechanics. This won't change much about the viability of the legendary overall, as it's still a very respectable choice in Mythic Plus if you want to be a bit more bursty, at the loss of some extended fight damage. For our last generic legendary change, we have Tiny Toxic Blade. This little Shiv damage booster has received almost a 43% damage increase, going from Shiv dealing 350% more damage up to 500% on the PTR. The thing about Shiv for Subtlety and Outlaw is that it's purely used for its utilitarian benefits, such as slowing enemies and removing enrages from targets, depending on what poison you have active. For Assassination, Shiv is used as a damage amp much like the old Toxic Blade talent, however this is purely a single target effect, and really even with this huge damage increase, it is still not enough to become the best patchwork fight legendary, so this will most likely be an unused effect even with this massive buff. Next we'll be going over the Assassination Rogue legendary power changes. First we have Doomblade receiving a decent increase. This legendary power makes your Mutilates apply a bleed that lasts for 8 seconds, and the bleed damage is based off a portion of the Mutilate's damage. It also has a secondary effect, making your Envenoms deal 5% more damage for each bleed you have on the target, which includes the Doomblade bleed as part of it. Essentially, you should always have Garrote, Rupture, and now Doomblade bleed on your target, resulting in a minimum of 15% damage increase on all your Envenoms while using this legendary. This is, from a pure single target perspective, looking to be the strongest patchwork legendary for Assassination. However, its value will drop off very heavily in anything other than pure single target encounters, so be cautious if you decide to spend the Soul Ash on this one. In comparison, the Zul'jik Insignia will still be an exceptional single target choice and has far more versatility in multi-target situations, as well as offering a unique facet to Assassination's damage profile: execute phase damage. For bosses such as Sire Denathrius or anything with a very difficult final phase of damage, Zul'jik will be a very popular choice due to the need to increase your damage during that very critical phase. We've also seen a buff to the Duskwalker's Patch legendary. This legendary helps bring Vendetta off cooldown faster by making it so that when you spend a certain amount of energy, it'll reduce the cooldown of Vendetta by 1 second. On live servers, this is 50 energy per 1 second, and it has been buffed to only require 30 energy per 1 second of cooldown reduction. This is another pure single target effect since you can only have Vendetta on one target at a time, and unfortunately it's not all that great even with this buff, so I will not see this overtaking either the Zul'jik Insignia or Doomblade in the future. Up next is the Outlaw Rogue legendary buffs. First, we have Concealed Blunderbuss. This legendary makes it so your Sinister Strikes, when they trigger an extra attack, have a 40% chance to make your next pistol shot shoot extra pistol shot hits. This is being buffed from 2 extra hits up to 3, and for those who haven't used this legendary before, each of those extra pistol shot hits does grant combo points. This is honestly a pretty fun legendary to use, and it's actually not too bad in single target. However, it's overshadowed by the mighty passive power that is Celerity. Unfortunately, Concealed Blunderbuss has some fatal flaws. For one thing, the extra hits don't work with Blade Flurry. You also don't gain any combat potency procs from extra hits like you do with normal pistol shot casts, and only the initial pistol shot hit is affected by the Quick Draw talent. There is also a really high likelihood of overcapping on combo points with this legendary, since each pistol shot hit gives 1 combo point, meaning, for example, if Broadside is active, then you'll receive 8 combo points per Blunderbuss cast. All of this results in some major downsides for what could potentially be a fantastic legendary if these were addressed, so as of now I'm skeptical that this legendary buff will be seeing too much attention. Next, we have Greenskin's Wickers. This effect makes your next pistol shot used after casting between the eyes deal bonus damage, and has been increased from 200% up to 300%. This is a noticeable bump up in damage, and is a pretty easy and familiar playstyle for those familiar with the Deadshot Azerite trait from Battle for Azeroth, or the original Legion version of this legendary. Unfortunately, it is still very likely to be overshadowed by Celerity and overall throughput, though it is certainly much closer in performance than it was previously. Lastly, for Outlaw Rogues, my beloved Guile Charm. This legendary has seen some high and low points since the beta iteration of it, where it was once a powerhouse of a choice. Unfortunately, even with this latest tuning pass, it is still likely that it will not be a compelling option. For those who don't know how this legendary works, every time you cast Sinister Strike, and when Sinister Strike triggers an extra hit, you'll start building up a stacking damage buff increase. Every 6 Sinister Strike hits will progress the buff from Shallow Insight to Moderate, and then Deep Insight. Once you reach Deep Insight, you will retain this buff for 10 seconds before the cycle starts all over again. This currently caps out at 10% on live servers and is being increased to 15%. This will allow for slightly harder hitting moves in some situations, however Outlaw is not the sort of spec that generally holds cooldowns for extended periods of time, so holding any damaging bonuses or effects for Deep Insight for more than a few seconds will most likely result in a net loss of overall damage. Really a shame, as this was one of the legendaries I was originally most excited to see return. For Subtlety Rogues, we have 2 legendary changes. Deathly Shadows will be receiving a damage boost and duration boost. This legendary gives the user a flat damage buff and 5 combo points every time they cast Vanish. On live servers, this is a 15% damage buff for 12 seconds, but will be increased to 20% for 15 seconds. However, this effect will only apply to Subtlety Rogues. If Assassination or Outlaw Rogues use this legendary, it will still only give the 15% for 12 seconds. Unfortunately, Deathly Shadows is not a terribly impressive legendary due to the lengthy cooldown of Vanish for Subtlety, though it technically would allow for some more bursty damage windows, but at the expense of overall damage. And lastly, the Rotten. This legendary causes your next Backstab or Shadow Strike after you pop Symbols of Death to deal extra damage and generate 4 extra combo points. The damage boost on live servers is 30% and will be increased to 50% on the PTR. This is a pretty easy to use effect, as generally speaking you want to always use Symbols of Death with a Shadow Dance charge, meaning you'll then smack your target upside the head with a guaranteed, critically hitting Shadow Strike for bonus damage and you'll get full combo points out of the deal. While this legendary does play nicely with Subtlety's rotation, its performance is pretty lacking, and this damage boost will not be enough to make it very pertinent. It is also strictly a single target legendary and simply cannot compete with Akari's Soul Fragment in that department. Admittedly, I was hoping to see enough of a tuning pass where these underused legendaries would become really competitive or maybe even beat out some of the more common options that are basically one-size-fits-all options right now in Shadowlands. Really, for all 3 specs, you have one legendary you can use for basically everything PvE oriented. For Subtlety, you have Finality, for Assassination, you have Zul'jik Insignia, and for Outlaw, you have Celerity. There's also Master Assassin 2 if you want a more niche, bursty type of playstyle, and for Mythic Plus, and for Subtlety, you have Akari's Soul Fragment for pure single target damage. With Doomblade getting a pretty noticeable buff up, it will become basically the Akari's Soul Fragment for Assassination, so strictly single target only, but it will be the best at that, so that's something to see at least. I guess on the bright side, you don't have to worry about stocking up thousands of Soul Ash so you can upgrade legendaries and spend tons of gold on new armor pieces, so that's something of a bright side, I suppose. Either way, I hope you folks enjoyed this look at the 905 PTR and the legendary tuning that's been going on for rogues. If so, then please consider leaving a like, a comment, or maybe subscribing to the channel if you haven't before. It's all really appreciated and helps a lot with the channel's growth. As always, I want to extend my gratitude to you, my viewers, commenters, subscribers, and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.